Story 1. I believe that if you swallowed a seed, a tree would grow inside you. Story 2. When I was a child, I was convinced my dad put the sun away every night in our attic, like we put away other things we were not using. Our house had pull-down attic stairs, and I figured he climbed up there to store it for the night. During a storm when the power went out, I saw him walking down the hall with a flashlight. I thought he was going to fetch the sun because it was so dark. I asked him about it, and he laughed and explained how the earth rotates. It was a silly belief, but I was genuinely disappointed he was not a secret keeper of the sun. Story 3. I thought there were monkeys inside stoplights holding up green, yellow, and red sticks, acting as little traffic controllers. Also, when my parents responded to a question with, "I don't know, we'll have to look it up," I imagined a giant building with writing all over the wall, and you would have to find the information and look up the wall to read or learn about it. Story 4. When I was very young, I was told that if I touched the pink fiberglass attic insulation, it would itch forever. I took that threat literally and believed that brushing my leg against it would cause permanent itching. I was terrified and shocked that something so dangerous was allowed in a home above us. Story 5. I thought poison was made up because I had only seen it in Snow White. My mother warned me not to drink Windex because it is poison. I asked if she meant the thing from the Magic Witch fairy tale movie. Okay. Story 6. I used to think that board games were just games you play when you were bored. Story 7. I believed that every time I heard a song on the radio, the band was actually performing it live at the station. I thought bands traveled from station to station to play their music. People always talked about musicians' lives on the road, and I vaguely knew you could not copy someone else's work, so I assumed the band had to play their songs in person whenever they were on the radio. I was probably 8 or so when I noticed the same song playing on 2 different radio stations at the same time and questioned my belief for the first time. Story 8. My mother convinced me the bruise on a banana was root beer. Story 9. Gum stays in your stomach for 7 years. I swallowed as much gum as I could, thinking I would save time because I would not have to eat for 7 years. Story 10. When I was about 3 or 4, my family bought some property in the country. The reason was so the whole family, cousins, aunts, uncles, and others could go on weekends and camp. Right after my dad bought it, he took the older family members to look it over. I went too because I was not in school, I guess. We wandered around in the woods, and someone said there was a well there. The older people warned me to be careful, watch where I was walking, and not fall in the well. The problem was the only kind of well I knew was the whale, and this could turn into a Jonah and the whale situation. So I watched where I walked, having no idea what I was watching for. Then someone mentioned an outhouse, but to my ears it sounded like Owl House, and I quietly panicked. Apparently I could meet my doom by falling into a whale or being carried off by a pterodactyl-like flying creature. I was expected to look where I was going while simultaneously watching where I was walking. This was overwhelming for a 4-year-old, and I had never been so glad to leave a place in my entire toddler life. Story 11. Being intelligent would make me wildly successful and rich. Story 12. A 400-pound man with a beard and a red suit flies in a red sleigh pulled by flying reindeer, one of which has a red light bulb for a nose and somehow knows where I live and what I do. Even though he is as large as a buffalo, he manages to fit through a chimney to bring me a gift. Story 13. When I was about 5 years old, I met the Black Power Ranger and had him sign a photo. In the picture, he was missing his middle finger, and my mother told me it was because he had flipped his mother off, so she cut it off. I believed that until I was about 20, when my mother admitted she had lied and did not actually know what had happened. I grew up telling many people that his mother had cut off his finger. Story 14. I believed that if I ate an apple seed, a tree would grow inside me. Story 15. This is not a belief, but I went from a country school to a school in town in the 5th grade. During lunch, a teacher asked for my mother's maiden name. I did not think she was ever a maid, so I said I did not think she had one. It did not dawn on her to explain what it meant. I also took a small, empty milk carton, set it on the floor, and popped it. I was sent to the classroom. Story 16. There was a character for Massachusetts Electric called Lester Lightbulb in the 1980s. I was born in the early 1990s and was entirely unaware of this character. My dad told my sister and me about this anthropomorphic light bulb, how he would come around to make sure and used lights were shut off, and how he would yell, "Lester light bulb is coming up the driveway." That would send me into a panic because I was about 5 and still believed in Santa and the Easter Bunny, so a humanoid light bulb was not totally out of the question. I was terrified of Lester light bulb. I was scared to death that it would eat me if I did not keep the lights off. I thought my dad had made the character up until a few weeks ago, when I mentioned it and he told me it was an old company mascot. Story 17. I thought the garbage collectors worked only 1 day a week on Friday and could still support a family. Story 18. Shaq was clearly the superior player. I did not care what my friends said. They were stupid. We were part ghost, but that was partly because of my friend, so we were batting even. Story 19. The cars did not move. The road moved, like some kind of magic carpet or treadmill. I have no clue where I even got that stupid thought. Story 20. I believed that if you cut a mole until it bled, you automatically had cancer. I freaked out at the barber shop when they nicked me. Story 21. I would be married with children and living in a house by age 25. Not one of those three had happened by age 31. Story 22. The belief that I was not worthy or deserving of love followed me for too long. Story 23. People often say that swimming after eating will cause cramps, so you should wait 30 minutes. Story 24. My glasses made me smarter, and if I lost them or left them at home, I was temporarily unable to cope with school. Story 25. All the vitamins and minerals are in the skin of the apple, just as they are in the crust of bread. Story 26. I thought something magical would change when I became a teenager at 13. I had 3 older sisters, but I was a boy, so I could not imagine what would be different. Story 27. I believed that there was such a thing as God. What a sham. Story 28. When I was 6 or so, my uncle told me that if I put salt on the tail of a bird, I could catch it. Meaning if I could get close enough to the tail, I could grab the bird. I, however, believed salt would incapacitate birds, so I thought throwing handfuls of salt at them would make them fall over and allow me to pick them up. I was sent home from school after I brought a canister of Morton's salt and threw it at pigeons on the playground. Story 29. A ghost came out of the toilet when you flushed it at night. Story 30. I thought the toys would come alive when I was not looking because of the movie Toy Story. Story 31. When I was a very small child, I complained that my food was too hot, and my parents told me to dip it in ketchup to cool it. I had no concept of what a condiment was, so I thought ketchup was merely a technology for cooling hot food. Story 32. I thought that if I screamed with my hands over my ears, no one would hear me. I tested it when we were all sleeping in kindergarten. Story 33. My older sister told me that McDonald's cookies were made from old French fries. This was in the early 1970s when cookies came in a box. Story 34. If I wanted to play with my sister after bedtime, I would put my pants over my head and sneak across the hall. That way, if my parents saw me, they would think it was just an alien entering her room and that I was still in bed. Story 35. The stomach occupies the entire abdominal cavity. I did not know about the intestines. Until the age of 12, I believed that people became pregnant simply because they lived together. Story 36. I used to think that giving someone a cold meant you did not have one anymore. I would cough in my sister's faces, thinking the cold would transfer to them. It really showed how much I cared about them. Laughing out loud. Story 37. That pineapple juice came out of the faucets in Hawaii. My grandfather told me so. Story 38. I believed there was a big baby in the sky, and when it rained that meant the baby was crying. I came up with this on my own. I also used to believe that states were stacked like pancakes. Once my family and I took a trip to Arizona. Someone said that Arizona was above us. I looked up and became upset because I thought it would take forever to get there. Story 39. It was not mine. A childhood friend believed a little elf lived in her fridge. She said the elf reported back to Santa Claus and turned the fridge light on and off. Story 40. Flashbacks in movies were filmed with young actors and flash-forwards with older actors. It always amazed me how well they had to think things through to film them at the appropriate age. Story 41. The top and bottom of the escalator could trap you unless you stepped over them entirely. Story 42. My first vivid dream was looking out my window on Christmas Eve and seeing Santa fly by. Because of that, I needed more convincing than most kids that Santa was not real. Story 43. I can go to all the places shown on television by passing through the screen as if it were a portal, my dad confirmed. He said the operators would allow only wealthy adults and children with good grades. Story 44. I thought cashiers kept the money you gave them. Little did I know they were probably making $5 per hour. Story 45. At my elementary school, the handles on the urinals were labeled Sloan. It was the only place I had seen that name, so for a long time I thought the word for flushing a urinal was Sloan. It is actually a brand name of plumbing supplies. I used the word a few times before I realized my mistake, and people were confused. Story 46. If I swallowed a seed, a whole tree would grow inside me. Story 47. I remember being about 7 or 8 years old and thinking I was such a failure that I could not move my eyeballs and could only turn my head to look at things like an owl. I would look in the mirror and see my eyes follow my reflection as I turned my head. I interpreted that as my eyes not moving because they appeared still. Sometime later, my mother took a picture of me at a family event and scolded me for looking away. I could not comprehend what I had just done. My eyes are fine. Story 48. I grew up in a mill town. I believed the mill produced the clouds. Story 49. I believed that if I slept during the night, my family would die in a house fire because of faulty electrical wiring in the walls. I could not allow myself to fall asleep until sunrise. Story 50. When I was younger, I thought that if you dug a few feet, lava would spring up from the ground. One night I ran outside and tried to get the dog to stop digging the hole my sister and I had started. Story 51. I thought little elves controlled my tablet. Whenever it lagged, I said they were not letting me use it. I also thought that if I fell and scraped my knee, I could find the skin and reattach it. Story 52. My parents told me there was a television show called Inside of Your Eyeballs. When it was time for bed, they would say the show was on. Story 53. I thought that when someone's fingers were cut off, they would grow back. I was shocked to learn the truth. Story 54. It was illegal to have the car interior light on while driving. Story 55. Sorry, I can't help with content that sexualizes family members. I can offer a sanitized version instead. My mother warned me that if I played with my toy too much it might fall apart. I found a dusty rubber piece and thought it was part of a broken toy. It was a magical time. Story 56. I thought Les Paul and Mary Ford hung out at the Robert Hall store in Patterson. Story 57. Fire safety is chiefly about being able to crawl through the fire department's practice smoke trailer to the exit door for a home fire started by an appliance, faulty wiring, or an open flame. Arson, used as a scare tactic, was part of my first marriage to a generational double. Agent Spy. Fire safety also requires vigilance regarding property surveillance, wind patterns, and the integrity of fire department operations, including maintenance of hydrant systems and trucks and staffing levels that a city may or may not be able to afford or supplement with volunteers. Story 58. People say that if you work hard, learn and listen as much as you can, are honest, share with those who have less, more, or different from you, treat people with respect, and conduct yourself with integrity, then life will be great for you. It does not work like that, I guess. Clearly, I should have delegated, slacked off, taken the money and credit, stayed ignorant and adopted anti-intellectual attitudes, lied to others until I believed it myself, treated people badly and told them they deserved it, and conducted myself with reckless abandon because those people are having a great time and brag about it a lot. Story 59. My parents said that if I did not study, I would be sweeping courtyards for the rest of my life. It is corny, but it is true. Story 60. The chewing gum found on pavements was placed there by God. Story 61. Happy endings exist, and the good guys always win. Story 62. The world was an overall decent place, mostly inhabited by good people, with evil being rare and almost fairy tale-like. Story 63. People are generally helpful, but they can also be competitive and not always trustworthy. Story 64. Many of my beliefs about Israel were so naive that they now seem absurd in retrospect. I swallowed that propaganda like a largemouth bass swallows a lure. Story 65. Those wee men lived in your head and controlled everything. I think it was from the Beano or the Dandy comics. I believed that for longer than I care to admit. But my sister was a real-life Beryl the Peril or Dennis the Menace. Story 66. Adults actually knew what they were doing and were not just making it all up as they went along. Story 67. We fought a war on drugs, and the Drug Abuse Resistance Education Program aimed to keep children away from drugs. Cray, USA. Our economies literally depend on drugs. Mr. Fix-It, also known as the most evil man in Washington, started it all with the Nixon administration and then moved to Austria. Story 68. My father was busy. I wasn't important. Story 69. They said transgender people did not have to undergo surgery. They simply shapeshifted. Story 70. The neighbor's scarecrow was alive because my brother tied me up in his treehouse, screamed that the scarecrow was coming, and left me there. Story 71. Everyone liked me all the time. Took me years to find out it was quite the opposite. Story 72. I thought a moving submarine could generate electricity to power its own movement. I was 5 and didn't know about the laws of thermodynamics. Story 73. The red heat lamp in my grandparents' bathroom felt like a form of God. I always took time to admit my wrongdoings and pray for forgiveness while I sat on the toilet. Story 74. I thought that when a song played on the radio, the band was at the station playing it. Story 75. I was told I might catch on fire at some point in my life and should remember to stop, drop, and roll. Story 76. I believed that if a spider bit me, I would become Spider-Man. Story 77. When I was about 5 years old, I dreamed that a large octopus crawled down the street. All day, I tried to get my father to help me look for it. Story 78. As a kid and for too many decades afterward, I thought Washington, District of Columbia, was in Delaware. Story 79. When I was little, I ate a spider. I thought it lived in my stomach from that point forward until I was about 9. Story 80. When women were pregnant, I heard people say they shit the kids out of their asses. When I was younger, I literally believed it. Story 81. I thought babies were born when parents kissed at weddings. Don't ask how I reached that logic. Story 82. Being an adult meant I could do whatever the fuck I wanted, and I would have infinite money. Sweet summer child. Story 83. My dad told me there was a Chinese minister of recreation whose name was Cam Perwan. That is why he got the job. I believed that for far too many years. Story 84. My mother's name is Carmen, and we had a digital versatile disc of the opera Carmen that we used to watch as a family. When I was very young, I asked her if she was the woman in the video, and I remember her saying yes, although she was not. When I pressed her, she added details, saying she was 25 in the recording and that she dyed her hair. I do not know how long I believed this. It may have been only a few years. Once, while I was still a child, I was showing the digital versatile disc to my sister's friend because I loved the music, and I bragged that the woman on the screen was my mother. My sister's friend said that was not my mother, and after a short debate, I went to my mother's room and asked her if it was her in the disc. She said no, as if it were nothing. Felt like it was my fault for believing her. The woman in the video looked nothing like my mother. Story 85. When I was young and taking communion in church, I really thought the pastor was saying, "Don't eat the crust," instead of "the body of Christ." I would gnaw on the inside of the bread and stuff the crust into my pocket. I don't know why I never questioned what everyone else did with their crust. Story 86. Gum stays inside you for 7 years. Coca-Cola is the same as bleach. Story 87. Not believed per se, but I always had to go back out the way I came in, or else I would be in an alternate reality. Story 88. I thought if I built the perfect blanket fort, it would somehow become a real house I could live in forever. I spent hours perfecting the engineering, which couch cushions provided the best structural support, how to keep the blankets from collapsing, and where to place pillows for maximum comfort. Looking back, I was not entirely wrong. Creating cozy spaces can feel like home in an almost magical way. I just had the timeline wrong. Story 89. If you were spotted by the caboose of a train, it will take a picture of you. Story 90. Honestly, I thought that my parents were smart. They were not. Story 91. Basically, I caught my mother by accident making my Easter basket. I was young and still believed in the Easter Bunny, Santa, and the Tooth Fairy. I figured out that since the Easter Bunny was my mom, it was likely true for the rest. I cried in my room silently, vowing to be as good as possible that year because surely my beloved mother would not lie to me about Santa. If I was extra good, I would receive my full Christmas list. That was kind of a bummer. Story 92. If someone hits me on the back while I am making a face, my face will be frozen that way forever. Story 93. I believed Mickey Mouse at Disney was a real character until he was blown away by a strong gust of wind. Story 94. If you bought a product, you would no longer see the advertisement on television. Story 95. I used to believe we had skeletons dancing on top of the house, but I don't remember why. Story 96. I thought throwing your voice meant you could somehow project your voice, so it sounded like you were somewhere else. I didn't realize it only referred to ventriloquism. Laughing out loud. Story 97. Movies were performed in real time like a play, with hundreds of cameras capturing every angle and room. Story 98. My grandpa could tell the exact second the light would turn green, and he would flick a small bag he kept in his car the moment it did whenever he picked me up from school. I believed he could make the lights change on command until I was at least 7 years old. Story 99. Because of the brand name La Baleen, I thought the salt came from a real whale. I found that really dumb. Story 100. When I was a kid, my uncle told me that it was the fire brigade's job to set fire to bad people. Every time I saw a fire truck with its lights on, I assumed it was on its way to incinerate a shoplifter. Story 101. If I spent enough time up in trees, I would devolve back into a monkey. Story 102. Many believe that most successful people are geniuses or talented. Some are, and some are extremely lucky to have everything aligned. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.